Sarah Jenkins clutched her worn leather backpack as she exited Dr. Reed's office, her mind racing with equal parts excitement and dread. The assignment sheet felt unnaturally heavy in her hand, its implications weighing on her more than the stack of textbooks she carried. The hallway of the physics department stretched before her, sunlight streaming through tall windows, illuminating dust particles that danced like quantum possibilities in the air. "The Clearwater readings are essential, Miss Jenkins," Dr. Reed had said, his voice carrying that peculiar mix of academic detachment and urgency she'd come to recognize. "Your theoretical models need empirical validation, and that facility is the only place with the specific radiation signature your dissertation requires." Sarah paused at the building's entrance, watching rain begin to fall on the campus quad. Graduate students hurried past, their lives uncomplicated by requests to enter government-restricted zones. Her phone buzzed with a text from the hospice nurse, caring for her father. "Had a good day today. Asked about your research again." A lump formed in her throat. Dad had been the one who'd fostered her love of physics, who built her first telescope when she was 8. Now his mind was fading faster than his body, but he still remembered her work. In the university library, Sarah pulled up classified documents she wasn't supposed to have access to, courtesy of her hacking skills developed during undergraduate years. The Clearwater incident of 2018 remained heavily redacted, but between the lines, she sensed something beyond conventional scientific understanding. Satellite images showed the facility surrounded by a perfect circle of altered vegetation, as though reality itself had different rules there. "You're not seriously considering this, are you?" Ethan's voice startled her. He slid into the chair opposite, his concerned eyes fixed on her screen. As both her lab partner and almost boyfriend, he knew her well enough to read her determination. "I don't have a choice," Sarah whispered, closing her laptop. "My funding runs out in 3 months. Without this data, my dissertation collapses." "There's a reason it's called the maximum threat zone," Ethan countered, leaning forward. "People who go in don't come out the same, if they come out at all." Sarah's fingers traced the edge of her father's old watch on her wrist. "Dad sacrificed everything for my education. I can take a calculated risk for him." That night in her apartment, Sarah prepared methodically. She calibrated her radiation detectors, packed emergency supplies, and studied topographical maps of the area surrounding Clearwater. The facility sat nestled in a valley 50 miles from campus, accessible only through heavily monitored roads or a treacherous hike through dense forest. As dawn broke, Sarah stood at her window watching the city awaken. She felt a strange calm settle over her, the kind that comes with irrevocable decisions. Her phone rang, displaying Dr. Reed's number. "I've arranged for a temporary security clearance," he said without preamble. "It won't get you inside, but it will get you to the perimeter without immediate arrest. The rest is up to you." "Why me?" Sarah finally asked the question that had haunted her since yesterday. "Why not send a research team?" A long pause followed. "Because you're brilliant enough to understand what you find, and desperate enough not to ask too many questions." A line went dead. Sarah shouldered her backpack and took one last look at her apartment. On her desk sat a framed photo of her father in his prime, standing proudly beside a teenage Sarah at her first science fair. Next to it lay her unfinished dissertation, years of work culminating in this moment. Whatever waited in the maximum threat zone would either complete her research or destroy it entirely. Either way, there was no turning back now. The military checkpoint loomed ahead, a stark contrast to the serene forest surrounding it. Sarah adjusted her fake credentials, Dr. Reed's temporary clearance badge hanging around her neck. Her heart pounded as she approached the guard station, rehearsing her cover story about collecting soil samples for an environmental impact study. The guard, a young man with suspicious eyes, scrutinized her paperwork longer than necessary. "University research, huh?" he said, handing back her documents. "You know the rules." Stay within the green zone only. Anything beyond that requires military escort. Sarah nodded, knowing full well her destination lay miles beyond the permitted area. As she drove past the barrier, relief washed over her, but it was short-lived. The real challenge lay ahead. The landscape began to change subtly as she ventured deeper. Her car's GPS flickered, then died completely. The vegetation grew increasingly strange, trees bent at impossible angles, flowers with colors that seemed to shift when viewed directly. Sarah parked at the end of the access road and continued on foot, her radiation detector already registering anomalous readings. The air felt heavier here, charged with something she couldn't identify. Science had always been her comfort zone, but for the first time, Sarah felt like she was walking into something beyond rational explanation. Her father's watch, the one constant in her changing life, suddenly stopped ticking. The boundary to the maximum threat zone wasn't marked by fences or signs, but Sarah knew she'd crossed it when her phone emitted a high-pitched whine before shutting down completely. The forest grew silent. No birds, no insects, just the sound of her own breathing and footsteps on the unnaturally soft ground. Sarah checked her radiation detector again. The readings were off the charts, but in patterns that defied known physics. She documented everything meticulously, her scientific mind fighting to categorize the uncategorizable. A sudden movement caught her eye. Through the trees, a figure watched her. "Hello?" Sarah called out, her voice sounding flat in the strange air. The figure disappeared, but Sarah felt certain she was being followed. The sun seemed to hang unnaturally in the sky, as if time itself moved differently here. Her research had suggested spatial anomalies, but experiencing them firsthand sent chills down her spine. Hours of hiking brought her to a ridge, overlooking the Clearwater facility. The concrete structure sat in a perfect circle of barren earth, as if nature itself refused to approach. Sarah's detector began to malfunction, the readings fluctuating wildly. As she descended toward the facility, a voice called out from behind her. "I wouldn't go down there if I were you." Sarah spun around to face a man in his 60s, with wild gray hair and eyes that had seen too much. His clothes were worn but clean, his posture suggesting military training despite his age. "Who are you?" Sarah demanded, her hand instinctively reaching for the pepper spray in her pocket. "Jackson Miller, former security. Now I guess you'd call me a resident." He gestured around him with a bitter laugh. "Can't leave, you see. None of us can. Not completely." Sarah's scientific skepticism battled with growing unease. "What happened here?" she asked, gesturing toward the facility. Jackson's eyes darkened. "They tore something open that should have stayed closed. A door that swings both ways." He stepped closer, examining her equipment. "Your professor sent you, didn't he?" Reed always was willing to sacrifice others. Sarah felt the ground shift beneath her, both literally and figuratively. The earth trembled slightly, and in the distance, the air above the facility seemed to ripple like heat waves. "How do you know Dr. Reed?" she whispered, but Jackson was already walking toward the facility. "Come on," he called over his shoulder. "If you're determined to commit suicide by curiosity, at least let me show you the right way in. The things in there, they're hungry for newcomers." Sarah hesitated, then followed, the boundary between her academic assignment and something far more dangerous, dissolving with each step toward the looming structure. The massive steel door to Clearwater groaned open under Jackson's practiced touch, revealing a corridor bathed in emergency lighting that flickered erratically. Sarah stepped inside, her scientific curiosity momentarily overriding her fear. The air felt charged, almost liquid in her lungs. "The main labs are 3 levels down," Jackson explained, his voice echoing unnaturally. "That's where they were working on the quantum barrier experiments." Sarah's radiation detector emitted a series of escalating beeps as they descended a concrete stairwell. Each reading contradicted established physics, showing patterns that should be impossible. "These readings," she whispered, "they suggest matter existing in multiple states simultaneously, at a macro scale." Jackson gave her a sideways glance. "That's just the beginning of what they achieved here." The research level was a testament to abandoned ambition. Sophisticated equipment lay covered in a fine dust that seemed to shimmer when disturbed. Sarah moved methodically through the space, documenting everything with her camera. In the central laboratory, a massive circular structure dominated the room, surrounded by computer terminals and monitoring equipment. "The quantum accelerator," Jackson explained, keeping his distance from the device. "Designed to peer into parallel dimensions." Instead, it punched right through. Sarah approached the machine, her hand hovering over its surface. The metal felt warm, vibrating subtly, though no power appeared to be flowing to it. "It's still active," she realized with astonishment. "How is that possible?" Jackson remained by the door, because what they opened never closed. "It feeds itself now." Sarah connected her laptop to one of the terminals, surprised to find it still functional. Files began to populate her screen: research logs, experimental data, theoretical frameworks that made her dissertation look like elementary school science. "This is incredible," she breathed, downloading everything she could. They were manipulating the fundamental forces of reality. As the files transferred, Sarah noticed a video log labeled Final Protocol. With trembling fingers, she clicked play. Dr. Reed's face filled the screen, looking years younger, but with the same intense eyes. "The breach is expanding faster than predicted," he said urgently. "Containment is failing. We're initiating emergency protocols and evacuating non-essential personnel. Those of us who've been exposed will remain to maintain the field barriers." Sarah felt the blood drain from her face. "Reed was here," she whispered. "He sent me into this knowing exactly what it was." A sudden shift in air pressure made her ears pop. The lights flickered more intensely, and the circular accelerator began to hum louder. "It's happening again," Jackson said, fear evident in his voice for the first time. "We need to move now." But Sarah remained transfixed by what was occurring in the center of the accelerator ring. The air seemed to fold inward, creating a distortion that bent light around it. Through this ripple, she glimpsed something: another laboratory, identical but different, where shadowy figures moved with purpose. One turned toward her, and Sarah gasped. The figure had her face, but with eyes that reflected no light. "They've seen you now," Jackson warned, pulling her away from the terminal. "Once they notice you, they don't forget." The building shuddered violently, dust raining from the ceiling. Sarah's laptop completed its download as emergency sirens began to wail. "What's happening?" she demanded, disconnecting her computer with shaking hands. Jackson was already moving toward the exit. Reality correction. The universe trying to heal the wound. Happens every few days. As they rushed toward the stairwell, Sarah heard footsteps echoing from multiple directions. Too many to be just the two of them. "We're not alone anymore," Jackson whispered, pulling her into a side room as shadows moved across the corridor ahead. Through the small window in the door, Sarah watched in horror as figures in tactical gear swept through the hallway. "Military?" she asked hopefully. Jackson shook his head grimly. "Not our military, not our world. The breach goes both ways, remember?" Sarah clutched her backpack containing the precious data, the weight of her discovery crushing down on her. This wasn't just homework anymore. It was a revelation that could reshape humanity's understanding of reality, if she survived to share it. Sarah and Jackson crouched in silence as the otherworldly soldiers moved past their hiding place. Their uniforms bore familiar insignias, but with subtle wrongness, colors inverted, symbols mirrored. "We need to reach the emergency exit on the east side," Jackson whispered once the footsteps faded. "It's our only chance." They slipped into the corridor, moving with desperate quiet through the labyrinthine facility. Sarah's mind raced, processing the implications of what she'd witnessed. Multiple realities, bleeding into one another through a wound in spacetime. The theoretical possibilities were staggering, but the immediate danger overshadowed her academic excitement. A sudden explosion rocked the building, throwing them against the wall. "That's our military," Jackson explained grimly. "They monitor the breach activity. When it spikes, they try to neutralize it from outside." They rounded a corner and froze. Commander Diana Walsh stood before them, her special operations team fanning out with weapons raised. "Hands where I can see them," Walsh ordered, her voice steady, but her eyes betraying shock at finding civilians inside. "This facility is restricted under National Security Directive 1872. Sarah slowly raised her hands, her father's watch glinting under the emergency lights. "I'm a researcher from Westlake University," she began, but Walsh cut her off. "I know exactly who you are. Dr. Jenkins. Your professor has been trying to reach you." The commander's radio crackled with reports of anomalous readings throughout the building. "We have orders to evacuate this facility immediately and take you into custody." Jackson stepped forward, recognition dawning on Walsh's face. "Miller, you're still alive?" The building shuddered again, more violently this time. "We don't have time for reunions," Jackson insisted. "The breach is expanding. I've been monitoring it for years." "This is different." Walsh hesitated, then made a decision. "Secure the civilians and prepare for immediate extraction," she ordered her team. A young soldier approached Sarah to take her backpack, but she clutched it protectively. "The data," she insisted. "It's vital. Dr. Reed needs to see it." Walsh studied her intently before nodding. "Keep it with you, but if you try anything, my men won't hesitate." As they moved toward the exit, the air around them began to distort visibly, reality itself seeming to thin. Sarah's radiation detector screamed with readings off the scale. "Commander," one of the soldiers called out, "the east exit is compromised. Spatial distortion making it impassable." Walsh cursed under her breath. "West exit, double time." They raced through corridors that seemed to stretch and contract unnaturally, the laws of physics becoming suggestions rather than rules. Sarah felt a strange pulling sensation, as if parts of her were being drawn in multiple directions simultaneously. "It's the breach," Jackson explained, seeing her distress. "It affects everyone differently. Those of us who've been exposed longer develop a certain resistance." Walsh led them into a large control room, dominated by monitors, showing various sections of the facility. On every screen, the air rippled with increasing intensity. "This is Walsh," the commander spoke into her radio, "requesting immediate aerial extraction from the roof. Facility reaching critical instability." The response came back garbled, but the message was clear enough. They were on their own. Sarah moved to one of the control panels, her training allowing her to interpret the readings. "The breach is expanding exponentially," she announced, horror dawning on her face. "At this rate, it will extend beyond the maximum threat zone within hours." Walsh approached, skepticism warring with growing concern. "What exactly are we dealing with, Dr. Jenkins?" Sarah pulled up the facility schematics on a monitor, pointing to the central laboratory. They created a tier in the fabric of reality, a doorway between parallel universes. It's been contained within this area for years, but something's changed. It's growing, and if it reaches populated areas, she didn't need to finish the thought. Jackson moved to another console, entering a series of commands. "There's a containment protocol," he explained, "designed as a last resort. It creates a quantum barrier that could restabilize the breach, but it requires manual operation." The implications hung heavy in the air. Walsh studied the schematics, her military pragmatism calculating odds and outcomes. "How long would it buy us?" she asked. "Enough time to evacuate the surrounding areas?" Sarah analyzed the data streaming across the screens, her scientific detachment battling with growing dread. "Maybe days, possibly weeks," she answered honestly. "But someone would have to stay behind to maintain the field." Their eyes met in silent, understanding as the facility trembled around them. Reality itself protesting the wound torn through its fabric. The control room erupted into frantic activity as Walsh's team prepared the containment protocol. Monitors displayed the expanding breach, a swirling vortex of distorted spacetime that pulsed with otherworldly energy. The quantum barrier requires precise calibration, Sarah explained, her fingers flying across the keyboard. Too weak, it fails immediately. Too strong, it could collapse the breach catastrophically, taking half the state with it. Jackson worked alongside her, his years of observation proving invaluable as they reconfigured the system. Walsh stationed her soldiers at strategic points, preparing for extraction while maintaining security. 15 minutes until the barrier is ready, Sarah announced, sweat beading on her forehead despite the cool air. The facility groaned around them, steel and concrete bending in ways that defied structural engineering. A violent tremor knocked several team members off their feet. One of the monitors showed new development figures emerging from the central laboratory, moving with unnatural coordination. "They're coming," Jackson warned. "The others have found a way through." Walsh directed her team to secure the entrances, but doubt clouded her eyes. "What happens if these things reach populated areas?" she asked Sarah quietly. "Theoretical physics doesn't have a precedent for this," Sarah admitted. "But based on what I've seen, they could potentially replace people, objects, even entire locations with their counterparts from parallel realities. Our world would become unrecognizable piece by piece." Walsh's face hardened with resolve. "That's not happening on my watch." The barrier system finally came online, humming with power. Sarah checked the final calculations, her heart sinking as she confirmed what she already suspected. "The system requires constant adjustment to maintain stability," she said, looking up at the others. "Someone has to stay." Jackson stepped forward immediately. "I'll do it. I've been here the longest." Sarah shook her head. "No, it has to be me. The calculations are complex, requiring advanced knowledge of quantum mechanics. I'm the only one who fully understands the mathematics involved." Walsh intervened, her voice firm. "We need that data you've collected, Dr. Jenkins. Your research could help us develop a permanent solution." Another explosion rocked the facility, closer this time. "We're out of time," Walsh declared. "Everyone to the roof for extraction, now." In the chaotic evacuation, Sarah made her decision. As the team rushed toward the stairwell, she slipped Jackson her backpack containing her laptop and research. "Get this to Dr. Reed," she whispered. "Tell him I figured it out." Before he could protest, she turned back toward the control console. Walsh noticed immediately. "Jenkins, what are you doing?" Sarah's hands moved across the controls, initiating the final sequence. "Saving time," she answered simply. "Get them out, Commander." "I'll hold the barrier as long as I can." Walsh hesitated, torn between her mission and leaving someone behind. "We can send another team, someone with more experience." Sarah smiled sadly. "There's no time, and no one understands this system better than I do now." She pulled her father's watch from her wrist, pressing it into Walsh's hand. "Please, give this to my father. Tell him I finished my homework." The decision made, Walsh ordered her team to continue the evacuation, practically dragging a protesting Jackson toward the exit. "I'll send help as soon as possible," she promised Sarah. "Just hold on." Left alone in the control room, Sarah focused entirely on the quantum barrier, making minute adjustments as reality fluctuated around her. Through the monitors, she watched Walsh's team reach the roof, boarding the extraction helicopter that appeared through swirling clouds. Only when they were safely away did she allow herself a moment of fear, of regret for the life she wouldn't get to live. The photograph of her father she kept in her pocket seemed to burn against her heart. Hours passed as Sarah fought to maintain the barrier, her scientific mind fully engaged in the most important work of her life. The facility continued to deteriorate, sections collapsing as the parallel realities pulled at its foundations. When the power began to fail, she rerouted essential systems, sacrificing life support for the barrier generators. The air grew thin and cold, but Sarah barely noticed, lost in the complex dance of equations and adjustments. In a strange way, she had never felt more alive, more purposeful. This was science at its most pure knowledge, applied to protect humanity, regardless of personal cost. As darkness crept into the edges of her vision, Sarah thought of her father, hoping he would understand her choice. She thought of Dr. Reed, who had sent her here knowing the risks, but perhaps not anticipating her courage. Most of all, she thought of the data now safely away, carrying the secrets of multiple realities and the potential to heal the breach permanently. Her dissertation would remain unfinished, but her contribution to science would be immeasurable. With failing strength, Sarah made one final adjustment to the barrier, stabilizing it for as long as possible. As consciousness slipped away, she smiled at the irony she had entered the maximum threat zone with homework. And in the end, that homework might just save the world.